plenary session, I would like to invite our final speaker to join us and give his insights about education after COVID-19. Professor Manuel Mazzara is a professor of computer science at Innopolis University in Russia. He has published extensively, in particular in the field of service engineering and software architecture. Today, he will tell us more about the past, present, and future of education, what we have learned by the experience of teaching online, and how we see and are getting ready for future developments in the field. Professor Mazzara.
I can use this one, maybe?
Yes.
I have a little bit more mobility, but I won't go very far anyway. This is a nice room. So I think I'm the last obstacle between you and the cocktail. So it's a kind of big responsibility. I make a deal with you. My talk is about 35, 40 minutes by schedule, but we are a bit behind schedule, but it won't be longer. My field of education, my professional field is mostly software engineering, in particular formal models for modeling concurrent systems. So I'm not a researcher in education, but we did research in education because it's that set of complex tools, of complex methodology and knowledge that helps me and my colleagues to transfer what is in my head to the head of other people. Of course, there is always some interferences in this transfer of information. And sometimes this interference is good. For example, in arts, in literature, we want that people has freedom to interpret my words. But in education, we want to limit this freedom as much as possible, in the sense that I would like that my ideas are coming to your head as much as unaltered. So the mysterious and charming word that we are discussing today is education, from the point of view of a user of educational tools. So I have a few points here, kind of part of my deal with you, and I will not say more than this. I will probably not say less than this. I want to talk a little bit what we have seen in education in the last couple of centuries, but very briefly, because now in the last few years we have seen something very new, but also something very old. How these two things can live together. They call it the fourth industrial revolution. Is something that goes way, way beyond education, but it also, of course, affects education, as all the other revolutions affected education. And there was an acceleration, as all my colleagues said before today, in the last 2-3 years, especially for online and hybrid education. We will talk a little bit about it. So how now we humans and machines, or intelligent machines, can and should and must cooperate for the best of society, but here my focus is very limited. Well, it's just education, but of course there is much more than that. And then I will ask you some questions, and then of course you can also ask me some questions if you want. I'm coming from a new university established 10 years ago, so we are celebrating 10 years this year, also with a book that is coming out with also some of this content that I'm presenting today. It was a good experience. I joined almost at the beginning because it was a green field. Literally, it was a green field in the sense that there was no campus, green or white, depending on the season, but there was nothing in terms of real estate, but there was also nothing in terms of research and education. So it was very convenient to experiment. It was more convenient and easier to experiment in such a context than in a very established organization. And we did experiment quite a lot. Look at this photo. This is photo from year probably 2015, something like this. And there is something very peculiar about this photo, because in a few minutes I will show you a couple of more photos, and I will ask you to find the differences, like those games on the magazines. Look at this photo. This is a bit older. I found this on the internet, so I don't know where this photo was taken. However, you can guess that the kids are kind of white Caucasian, probably somewhere in Europe or North America. Okay. But I have no idea. It's not important, because you can take a photo like this printed everywhere. Well, now our students have the laptops or other instruments, but this is also a computer, what they have, you know? It's an abacus. Another photo, people grown up. These are not kids, these are adults. In the English language, the word computer existed before the computer. I mean, it's not born in 1940s. If you go back to this photo, this is about 1930s approximately. Well, computer is this person, is this woman. Each of them is a computer. Because government, business, large organizations, corporations, of course, needed computers, needed to do vast computations, very complex computations, and they should have been done kind of manually. Of course, with some organization. There are supervisors. You see, there are people standing. These people are the supervisors. So there is a coordination, there is a process to achieve a complex result, almost manually. This is very interesting. No? All my students ask me about the word computer in English language or in other languages appeared in 1934. No, it existed before, and it was related to a person, to a human. And this is, by the way, the context in which Alan Turing lived. And when he created this model of computation, was looking at something like this, trying to automate such a reality. Another photo, and this is why I'm asking, look at what these kids are doing here, and look at what these older kids are doing. What they are doing? They are raising their hand. What does it mean? It's a kind of thing that is encoded in our culture. No, and we all know it means you are chasing attention of the teacher. You are chasing the attention of the person that in that moment is the authority, as a strong ethos in that room. Indeed, at the end of the talks, if you want to ask a question, you will have to raise the hand, like 200 years ago. Not much changed. If you look at the history of educational system, you see that Europe, North America, more or less, we're talking about 18th, 19th century. So during another industrial revolution, and has some very specific features, actually very simple, that you see literally everywhere in the world. This model of school is everywhere. Everywhere I've been, teaching university school is always the same. I mean, there is really the same patterns coming up. Some patterns are obvious, but maybe some patterns can be challenged. We take this for granted. I was about 35 years when I realized consciously this before I just went to school, because like this. There is a top-down management. There are outcomes that are designed really for meeting the need of the society more than the individual. Maybe some of this can be challenging. We take it for obvious, but let's dissect this beast before taking conclusion. Age-based classroom. Well, how else it can be? This is the only way we understand to teach. But really, well, why we should give for granted that kids should be divided by age? Maybe, maybe not. Focus on producing results. Well, also this seems very obvious. Now, what else we can do in life if not producing results? We are here for producing results. Maybe or maybe not. So you know, each of these points can be challenged. Depends what kind of school we want to build, and consequently, what society we want to build. This is, I know, people will like it, some people will not like it. This is a kind of talk that can polarize people. You say, some people will say, why you want to dissect this? It works so well for 3 centuries. Why we have to argue about each of these points? Well, maybe we shouldn't, or maybe we should. But let's continue. This is a piece of art, very cute, that is about 1920s, something like this, more or less the same period, a bit older, about 100 years ago. Is a French piece of art, let's call it like this. It is in a set of, I don't remember the name of the author, but it's a set of other pictures that are trying to tell us, according to this author, what would happen in the year 2000, so 80 years after it was drawn. And this is particularly interesting. You can find it online because, well, it's not the year 2000, but for me, this is the year 2020. Pretty accurate. The picture, look, what's happening? There is a professor, obviously there is an authority with an assistant, let's say, and this professor is putting books in a machine. Okay, this machine is cranking with physical work, and then the content of this book, they become audiobooks, basically, through wire. There is a wire mechanism, and the students are learning. It's not very far from what we are doing now. Okay, you cannot just crank in these books, but you can scan them, or you can make audiobooks, or they don't even need to be books. There are other methods of education in some machine, and the result becomes a kind of broadcast. In this case, it's a podcast. Now we also have video. There is much more. But for me, the level of accuracy that in 1920 a person can, guess the future is incredible, because this is really what we do now. Okay, now it's wireless. Now you don't need to be in the room, but you can also be in the room, or you can be elsewhere. So in some sense, the idea that education would have become digitalized at some point was there for a long time. It's pretty clear that at some point, for the people that are a bit visionary, that classic way of education that we have seen in the previous slides would have changed and should be changed, and now probably must be changed. So we have the old school with all those items, bullet points that we have seen before, and we have the new school. And here is where always the problem comes with new technology. The technology has always been depicted by Hollywood movies and pop culture for the last 50 years or more as something scary. Artificial intelligence on top of all. Maybe movies like Terminators on top of all. And there are many others. So people are scared of technology. But, well, if people are scared of technology, maybe we should blame someone. Because who depicted always technology as something scary? I've hardly seen any movies or books depicting advancement in technology as something pleasant. There are, of course, but usually there is a dystopic view of technology. So what we should do, what we can do for telling people that there are risks, there are concerns in the artificial intelligence and in technology, definitely, but on the other side, to counterbalance, there are also opportunities. And in the end, there are people that, maybe people like us, but I don't want to overrate us too much, people like us that can guide this process. But this process also means educating the user of the technology. Look at this picture, very interesting. On the left side, kids in a kind of modern learning room. You see this girl is reading some web that says the chicken life cycle, okay? And which is a look, clearly, because you never know it's before the eggs or before the chicken. And on the right side, there is an ancient painting that shows the way in which the kids are learning how to use the elbow. Okay. So these two elements are not one cannot replace the other. Okay. I was watching yesterday a video of a guy criticizing in details why people want to learn guitar, and they watch video YouTube why it doesn't work. That's not because this is, and it was technically point by point saying why most of the videos teaching guitar don't work. And imagine that instead of guitar would be using the elbow or something like this. You know, you still need some kind of vicinity, some kind of contact, you know, with the kind of contact between the teacher and the learner. We call fourth industrial revolution the moment in which these cyber physical systems are appearing. And it's the moment in which the technology is doing this big step, because the technology is going from literally from eventually from let's say above the skin to under the skin. But this is the cyber physical system. The technology is embedded in our clothing, in our skin, in our body, in our devices, like initially the smartwatches and so on. So like every revolution, a revolution leaves something behind and bring up new things. I'm pretty sure that at the moment of the first revolution, well, for example, horses or people selling horses were very much worried about the trade. Indeed, if you read one of the beautiful book by Jack London, in English, I think it's called The Call of the Wild, you know, where there is this dog that from California goes to Alaska and is stolen basically, and then he becomes one of these dogs pushing the sledge. The first owner of the dog, he buys the dog because it's bringing the post around, and at some point he has to sell the dog because his job of the dog and of the man is not even anymore, because they were bringing the post, and they say, well, next year the telegraph will come. So sorry, we don't have a job anymore, you know, there is no need anymore to bring the post. And so literature, I mean, this is just an example, not just industrial revolution, but if you look at the literature, there are incredibly emotional moments described by the authors, showing how some people, or some tools, or some animals, like in this case, were left behind. So it's very difficult to believe that in the fourth revolution, fourth industrial revolution, no one will be left behind. I'm sure a lot of people will lose jobs. A lot of jobs will become useless. Like the job of this dog of Jack London. So we need to be careful how these people can be trained for the new job or what should happen, because a lot of substantial society crises can come at this point in time. Considering all this situation, should we ignore all this? Shouldn't this affect the way we teach? Should just be happy because we just open Zoom, tack, some student connecting from the phone from their bedroom, sleeping instead of listening. Who cares, no? Because in 2020, when there was the emergency, some university did better, some faculty did better, some faculty did less, depending on their ability to manage the technology. But we really did, it was so rushed that we didn't really work on the details. And students, especially first year students, didn't have the maturity. And kids, I don't know what happened to kids with the remote teaching. So we really now have to make one step back. We accelerated this process, but now maybe we have to wait a little bit, slow it down a bit, and do it right. Doing it again right. So in this slide, I show some of the features, let's say, that bring the educational model from the first to the fourth industrial revolution. Some elements are very important. For example, the change of the role of educator. So when I was saying this educator as the part of to be in the room with the kids, everyone is chasing his or her attention and so on. I mean that the teacher is seen as an expert. And the opinion of this person, okay, things already have been changing in the last 2 decades, but if you go back not so many decades, it was very hard for a school, even when I was at school, it was very, not even impossible, but unthinkable. Unthinkable is more than impossible. Impossible, you cannot do it. Unthinkable, you cannot think it, so you can even try to do it. It was unthinkable to challenge the opinion of the teacher. It was just something that it wouldn't occur in your mind. Thanks God, this is changing. The teacher is a facilitator, can make mistakes, is more experienced than others, has more knowledge, especially has more pedagogical knowledge, has more experience. But in a discipline like IT, it's impossible to think that some of your students don't know more than you. Actually, they do know more than you. And if they don't, probably you should change job. You should go to teach somewhere else. So you have to be a facilitator. So we don't have any more this learner experience like factory model, student teaching, student listening the teaching, and just absorbing everything you say and repeat it. But it's a custom model. So we move from the teacher-centered to the learner-centered model of education. And also you move from a model that is called in America K-12, basically when you do all the classic grades of school from the age of 6 to 18, to something that could be lifelong learning. So the school doesn't end when you are 18 or 25, but you should learn all your life. I know that when you see this table, there is a line called expertise, and people don't like the fact that I write there anyone can teach, which is not true. This is a provocation. It's not true that anyone can teach, but it's not even true that the teacher knows best. The teacher is the facilitator of the process of learning and has the experience to mediate the knowledge of the people in the room. And particularly important now from the technological point of view. The thing that I said before are kind of little bit independent by the technology, are influenced by the technology, but a bit independent. But the last line is access. It's very important, and it is also very dangerous because it's very powerful that you can anytime, anywhere, any device, access some source of knowledge. This is extremely powerful. I mean, even 20 years ago, when I was a student, if I want to read an article or a book, I had to go to some place, the library. The library sometimes doesn't have your book. You have to go to another library. Maybe the other library is in another city. And maybe you get fed up of all this before reaching the book, and that's it. Or maybe or maybe not, or maybe you endure and you finally find the information. But now we have access with so much information that the question is how to regulate the access to this information, how to find what you need, and how to not get lost in a lot of smoke, I mean, informational smoke. And this is very difficult. This is why imagine a 16, 17 years old person that want to find their way through some discipline to find the right way. This is where the teacher is important, because the teacher is a facilitator, is a guide, is a mentor. So what we have learned from COVID-19, just a few points. There is an article, there is also part of a book that is being released next month that is elaborating this much more. I want just to give you a few points that I consider interesting, and then I will elaborate more. Definitely, new method of teaching. What are these new methods? So let's see better what does it mean. Evaluation and assessment by virtual means. Well, it was kind of existing before, but not so widespread. Like it was existed also the possibility to teach a lecture on Skype. We did it before. But if you go back 3-4 years, any conference would have, and they organized several conferences, and sometimes we received the request for, I cannot come, I didn't get the visa from Vietnam, for example, to Japan or to England. So I cannot come, I didn't get the visa in time. Can you allow me to present on Skype? Typically the request was on Skype, because Skype was the kind of the, like Aspirin, you know, the brand, the name of online tool. And yeah, okay, sometimes you have to accept this, but it was very undesirable. I mean, I perceived it as very undesirable thing, and all my colleagues saw. Actually, some colleagues were very strict. No, I don't want this. What does it mean to do presentation online? But now it's the opposite. Now, sometimes it's difficult to convince the speaker that should come to the conference to do, and same for the student. You should convince the student why should you come to the class when you can stay home? So this happened in a blink of an eye. 2019, 2022, we are there. So we accept it. So the educational programs now must include digital content. Until a few years ago, it was very common to identify, okay, read this textbook. Maybe you find also textbook online. Maybe you find some YouTube videos, but typically the syllabi of courses, but even now, they don't exploit all the power of the digital content. They still refer to kind of old style educational resources. The fact that we go into digital, it means that we have also open educational resources for free, legally, semi-legally, illegally, but de facto the students are accessing all the resources in an open manner, even those copyrighted. Okay, that's another story. But de facto they are using it. We cannot ignore it. No? This is the elephant in the room. Professional development should be also for teaching staff, because now the teachers sometimes are behind the students in using the tools. So even something as simple as Zoom, sometimes there are some settings that I don't know, and the students say, why don't do this? How do I do it? I don't know, and they know. So some features of this new educational model should compensate this decrease of campus experience. Campus experience is very important. Actually, I'm a promoter of the hybrid education, so I think that you should still leave the campus in some way. But probably it doesn't matter what we do, the students will leave the campus experience less. They will come less because there is a lot of traffic, because you need to commute 1 hour, because it's raining, because it's snowing, because it's cold. So they don't come, they have an alternative. So how we compensate this decrease on the campus experience if we don't add anything special in our content, in our online content? And especially we need particularly now to challenge to compete for every student attention in the room. Before we had to compete for the attention in the room. Now we need to compete for bringing them to the room first. And then to compete with all the devices that they can use. You cannot forbid them. I know some teachers until recently they forbid, okay, close the laptop, you cannot. Also because you don't know what that student is doing behind the laptop. Maybe he's translating some word, maybe he's playing a video game, maybe he's doing the assignment of another course. You discover this only when occasionally you attend the lecture of some colleague and you enter from the back door. They don't see you, so you are there and you see what they do. Well, often they play. I mean, this is my experience, but not all. So I mean, we cannot exclude it. Assessment should be done regularly. This is something that really came. We were doing this already before with several assignments, but the fact that 2020 came with the COVID really throw on me the understanding that the final exam had too much importance, even in terms of percentage for computing the final grade, sometimes 30, 40, 50%. And it's something that in computer science we call single point of failure. We all knew that, but we understand it very well only recently. So what happens if, well, for some reason, the student cannot come to the final exam because he's really ill or something really bad happens, or you cannot run the final exam because there is an earthquake, there is an emergency, there is anything. So this puts in trouble all the scheme, all the syllables of the course. But instead, if you split the grading in several more assignments and you bring relatively little weight to the final exam, well, then it's single point of failure, but it's not so important. If the final exam has 10%, it's very different than if it has 50%. So this is something that I changed in my way of assessing my courses. And in IT, we always have collaborative projects, but now their importance is even more fundamental because whatever happens, the students can still work home on their project, even if there is the new wave of COVID, which is the 5th, 6th, I'm not sure. And we are still all locked down again once more. Students can still work and cooperate online. So these are simple things. Actually, I'm very happy if you perceive them as obvious, because they are obvious. But in the practice, only recently, the people started using this in a widespread manner. Why? Well, because basically we went from a level of maturity of a teenager in terms of online content to a level of maturity of grown-up person overnight, pretty much. You know, there are a lot of movies or books about the guy changing time of life or going back in life again. So this is what we did, and this is where we had to grow very fast. There are many things that a teenager or a teenager organization knows in theory, but only as an adult man you feel it. Okay, I mean, when you're 40, you theoretically know the same stuff that you know when you are 15, but then you feel those things, so you can act more adequately. The same for an organization, the same for online education. We knew that in theory you can do this, that, but only when they hit us. Okay, now let's do it. We know what to do. Online education, sorry, here there is, the spelling is not correct. There is a little typo, but okay, education is here to stay. This is obvious, no? I mean, every month that is passing, we fully understand that online education in some form is not a crisis management tool. It's something that is a state. And I published this more than 1 year ago in an article. I call it the 4-move checkmate. And there was in our organization a lot of discussion by some professors saying, okay, when we will stop online education? What are you talking about? We are never going to stop online education. This is not happening. I bought the Zoom account, but then I don't buy it anymore when. No, it doesn't work like this. So it works more or less according to these 4 steps. At some point, you have to teach online overnight, because you grow from 15 years old to 40 years old. Then online teaching became kind of optional, but encouraged. But encouraged by who, particularly? Encouraged by the consumer of your educational materials, who are the students who understood that 2 things happened. Some of them understood better than you the potential of this instrument, and some they are lazy enough to go the easy way and they want to stay home and not to come. It doesn't matter. But both these forces are leading to a widespread acceptance, so that online education is just part of the regular routine. And I have to admit that there are a lot of good things about the online education, but also a lot of serious concern that requires maturity of the teacher, of the students, of the organization, of the processes to be managed correctly. Flexible schedule, fantastic. It's our dream, always been my dream. Location independence, financial affordability, but also physical affordability, accessibility, also in terms of the disabled students. You can imagine, I mean, the advantages. Of course, the modern infrastructure, they have a lot of facilities for disabled students, but it's still difficult for a person to commute 40 kilometers. So imagine a person coming from a financially challenged, they call it like this, I don't want to use the word poor, financially challenged family that has also an handicap, for which buying some prosthesis or something is very difficult, it's very expensive. Well, this person now can compete with you, can have access to the same quality material with no struggle. So yes, this is good. This is very good in terms of inclusivity and fairness. We should consider it. But on the other side, it really requires more self-responsibility. It requires a discipline, but not only for the teacher, actually maybe especially for the not only for the students, but maybe especially for the teacher, because the teacher is the role model. I mean, the kids, but also the young students, they do what the professor does. If professor doesn't go to the class, why I should go to the class? So, you know, going the lazy way is always the easiest way. You go lazy, wow, it's snow, it's minus 40 degrees today. Why I should take a car? The car is all frozen. I don't have a garage. Why I should go and drive 50 kilometers to go to the campus? And only if the senior people show the way, then the junior will follow. This is clear. This is a big chapter that I'm gonna only superficially touch here, because this has a lot to do with artificial intelligence, a lot to do with the intelligent future that is ahead of us. There is something that we in computer science call the Turing line, from Alan Turing. Alan Turing, in his article in 1952, first historically considered the first article about artificial intelligence, but this term doesn't appear much there, it doesn't appear at all. The term is can machine think, was the question. Says, it doesn't say it explicitly, but it's an elaboration of his thoughts. If you know the imitation game, probably you've seen this movie, it's called the Turing test, this imitation game, how to distinguish if your interlocutor that you cannot see is a machine or is a human. Because behind all this conceptualization, there is the understanding that, Turing understanding, 1952 and before, that human and machine are something different. Simply speaking, machine can do faster computation, but human have more common sense, whatever it means, okay? 1952. Now, if we talk about machine learning, and we talk about the modern interpretation of the word artificial intelligence, which is very different from the interpretation of 1952, we may argue about these two things. In some sense, we can say, we can see two movements, two directions. So the machines are becoming closer to the human, but not only. The humans are also become closer to the machine. So these two things, these two guys, they will meet somewhere halfway, because the more we embed the technology in our daily life, can be just a mobile phone, can be just a smartwatch, can be just using an application to call a taxi. Did you notice that we have to fulfill the desire of an algorithm? And most of the time, this algorithm is not open access. So you fulfill the desire of an algorithm and you don't know how this algorithm behaves. You notice this even if you use a simple taxi application, or maybe for food delivery or Facebook or whatever. There is an algorithm that you don't know, and this algorithm is dictating the rhythm and the process of your work and of your life. This is where you as a human fit the process, becoming closer to the machine. You have to facilitate the work of the algorithm, or even you have to follow the direction of the algorithm. On the other side, the intelligent machines are becoming closer to us because they can relate to us better. We can relate with them better. So eventually, humanity and machines will blend into something. And this is something is the kind of work that we have to see ahead, to see how we should and we must educate our younger generation. Something very challenging that people don't like, accepting that there will be wearable ID at some point, to enter the classroom, to enter this room, not a badge, not a key like 50 years ago or a badge like now. There will be an ID that is somewhere above your skin, maybe then under your skin. Let's reflect a little bit of all this discussion. It can be much longer, but I'll try to keep it shorter. What is the most important element that I want to distill? Only very few. Most of all, one. I noticed this problem before the pandemic because I come from software engineering, from computer science. We are introverts. The tendency is to be introvert. Not necessarily every computer science is introvert, but you can really see, even statistically, the feature of introversion more common. So people already before, they tended to create this learning cocoon. The pandemic gave them a strong justification to make this cocoon tighter and stronger, so to separate even more from the community. I think that it doesn't matter what kind of technology we use to teach in 10 years or 20 years, some kind of community that is physically connected, not only electronically or virtually, will still make the difference in the educational process. If you think about it, for 2 years, we couldn't really gather in large groups, but all through the history of humanity, all the most charismatic leaders, or maybe not charismatic leaders, even dictators, they like to gather people in large groups to feed the egregor. Okay, in esoteric terms, we also use the terminology, this energy, I mean symbolic energy, not actual energy, that helps people to work together towards an objective. This is the same for education. If I don't gather my team, my research team, or my students, how can I really direct them towards something? So summarizing, and then I have a couple of questions for you. What we have seen? Well, we touched superficially several aspects that would deserve a specific lecture, each of them. Some of the elements of our education, 100% outdated. We need to do something about it because there is a cyber-physical system for the industrial revolution happening, is already happening now that we are talking. But this doesn't mean that frontal classes existed for thousands of years will become ineffective or outdated. I can bet this will never happen. What we have learned so far, I told you how to change, how to adapt the educational process, and how we can blend the old and the new with the understanding that hybrid education or digital education in some sense is not going anywhere. It's a fact of our life. And then how the machine and humans will work together toward this objective. When I teach my students, for example, first-year students, I teach one programming language or another programming language, I always try to emphasize the fact that technology, yeah, counts, but it doesn't matter what technology you become fluent with right now. This technology in 5 years will change, will be definitely outdated, because our field is very quickly evolving. So what you have to focus on the education, even on the online education, are the principles and how to open the mind, to understand how to be a thinker and not an executor. So to ask the right question more than to give the right answer. Answer are less useful than questions. So what is next? So what we can do in our organization, in every organization, what question we should ask ourselves and then ask you. Definitely the best thing is to play together online and offline. But, well, this is very easy to say, no? Let's do both. Let's put them together in some magical way. The point is that how do you orchestrate? What does it mean? I mean, what does it mean to do together? Today we are doing together. There are people attending online, okay. But when you teach first-year students, it's more critical. You need to think a little bit of what you are doing. For me, online education is like the Ferrari of education in some sense. No? I had friends. Well, I don't know anyone that when I was 18 had a Ferrari, but I know several people that had a Porsche or some very powerful car. I have to tell you that 90% of them, they destroy the car in a few months with great disappointment of the father. So, well, it's the same here. This is a tool that you need to have some preliminary understanding of what you're doing before getting lost with online education in your room somewhere. So what we are doing in our university as a rule, as a policy, we introduce the instrument gradually. We cannot deny it, but we don't give this instrument in the end of the freshman. So all the first year and mostly all the second year, 90% of the second year, we teach like this. We teach the old way. In the second year, in the second semester of the second year, we start introducing some elements of the online education, of the hybrid education. And then later, in the third and fourth year, this is becoming kind of 50%, 50%. Okay, so this is what we experiment from next year, because the kind of emergency time, at least the emergency time for education, we consider it behind us, hopefully, at least from this point of view. And now we are starting rationalizing better what should be done. Instead of reacting, we proact. So definitely we need to prepare our students to appreciate the mix of the two formats, but especially, I think really especially, we have to prepare our teachers. This is really the challenge, because if we don't prepare our teachers, some of the elements that I presented today, I consider important, also reflections for teachers, and then the teachers will teach the students. I have a final question for you, so I will take only a couple of more minutes. Maybe one. So we can start from this to brainstorm. So I've seen this happening in the last couple of years pretty often. Not a person behind the screen, but I also have seen the emerging of this. This is one of the several fully virtual teacher. You can use, okay, they have a limited field of competence, but in the end, I also have a limited field of competence. No? So who knows who has a better field of competence. So what is the difference between this and this? So if you can have a teacher that can answer all your questions in a specific field equally to the teacher, then it's not the problem. Let's replace the taxi driver with artificial intelligence, or the truck driver, or let's replace the cashier at the bank or the supermarket. And we think that we are highly qualified specialists. So the automation, we don't touch us, we can see it and think the problem. No? So eventually, also our job may not be needed. And this eventually is not 30 years from now, because there are already domain-specific virtual teachers that can do quite okay. So what are we doing here? We are waiting to become unemployed, or maybe We do something else. Okay, that's my last slide. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Mazzara. I have to ask the audience, do you have any questions? Yes. Okay, thank you.
Maybe I don't need mic.
I think your voice is sharp, probably not.
My name is Arjun. I'm a researcher at Mobility. I'm speaking here as Secretary of Organizational Sciences and Department of Financial Management. Thank you very much for this very inspiring and thank you. Thank you very much for your inspiring and interesting presentations. Since we are here in education, I think this is a very important topic for us. And since online education is here to stay, as you mentioned, and you have this question at the end of your presentation, my question is, if we are online educators or facilitators, what about soft skills? Do we need soft skills? And what about them in online education?
Very interesting question, yeah, because I discussed this recently with my colleagues. We have at Innopolis one instrument that is called ISW, Instructional Workshop, Instructional Skill Workshop. Okay? It's a Canadian concept that one of our teachers wrote, and is a 3-4 day crash course on education. During the online period, we also delivered it, but we realized very soon that we can teach offline how to teach offline. We can teach online how to teach online, but we cannot teach online how to teach offline, because there is a large part of elements of education, including the soft skills, including the way in which you run a presentation when you are in a room, in which you engage the audience, all this part of ethos also, if you want, and pathos that you create with the audience, that cannot be easily done online. And in any way, you have to transfer these soft skills into something completely different. So soft skills, extremely important. I mean, 100% important. When you project the soft skills on a screen, you lose a lot. So you have to become very essential and use a subset of these soft skills in a very right way. Typically, extremely difficult to deliver an effective talk online the same way you could deliver it offline. The soft skill still counts, but they need to be taught and delivered in a completely different manner. I don't think you can teach online. You cannot educate online an educator to then go to the classroom and teach offline. It's like if you watch a movie, watch a video to play football, and then you say, okay, I know football. You need to have the coach grabbing you, pushing you to do the things. And also in our field, you need sometimes just the professor coming next to you, to your laptop, sitting and touching some button on your machine. It's also that part of things that is part of human interaction, part of the soft skill, part of the charisma of a teacher that should be done in the lab, in the physical field. So it is very challenging to transport these skills over there. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions? Yes, okay.
Thank you for the interesting presentation and additional insights in online education. My name is Milica Jovanovic. I am also from the Faculty of Organizational Sciences. My question is not about teachers, but about students. That is one of the, maybe the most important aspect of the education. It is not just about teaching, but also the networking, also their experience. And okay, one thing is the main teaching part, but I think that especially higher education is much more than only teaching. It's about group work. It's about the whole experience. So what are your insights about that kind of perspective in online education? Can you transfer that experience in online classroom?
Well, what I believe, for example, if you look at the top American universities and you will graduate from one of these top universities, your probability to know the CEO of a big company is much higher than if you graduate in Innopolis, for example, university. So definitely the people that go to the top school they are there also to meet each other, to develop professional networks that it's absolutely impossible to build online, because you cannot reach the same level of trust with your colleague if you never met this person. So students that will only study online, remotely, they will have, this is just a guess, so we need to wait 20 years and look at the data. But my guess that we will have much less like probability to go to top position in some companies, because their networking skills are poor, they are not developed, they don't know anyone. So in some sense, I guess that the kids from the more advantaged families, from rich families, let's use this term, they will probably keep sending them to offline education, not online education.
This is because of our faculty. The main part of our faculty, we are public school, we are not top American university. I think that the strongest point of each and every one of our students is the networking part.
Absolutely.
So that is why I'm skeptical about the online education, even in some middle class.
It will be a choice of students. No, probably at some point it will be a choice if they want to leave the campus or stay online. And this choice will reflect also in their future employment somewhere. We don't know, they don't know. We can only guess, but this is my guess. After 20 years, we'll see. I don't think, I'm not a promoter of online education. I'm just an acceptor of online education. I take it because I know that we cannot deny it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. We have one more question.
Good afternoon, everyone.
We are getting the mic.
Okay, I am Violeta Christopher, working as professor at Faculty of Economics in North Macedonia. First of all, I would like to congratulate the program and the organizing committee for making this international symposium happen in this hybrid format. It is really brilliant, and I want also to thank all the plenary attention experts and professors, because today we had the opportunity to increase our network by hearing all these outstanding presentations. In 2008, I was a master's student in Faculty of Organizational Sciences in the old building, but I had outstanding professors. Today, it is an honor to be in this new building. So having the outstanding professors and this new environment, it is a winning combination for the students. As we all know, what I would like to say is that the progress in one country depends on the education of the nation. But also, as Anton Chekhov, one of the famous world writers, said, the knowledge is worthless without the practice. I'm also teaching machine learning. And as we know, machines and machine learning can help replace these repetitive tasks, what workers can do, but cannot replace the way we are making the decisions, especially in the complex environment. In Sweden, now there is a new model for education. 70% it is the practice, and only 30% it is a combination of online and in-person teaching. So my question is more like a comment and opinion from your side. What about the practical work? So, okay, there will be like an online education and it will stay, but is there any proportion if we focus more online, the practical work to be more?
Yeah, I agree. For some disciplines like software engineering, most of the practical part can also be done online, because this is very different for chemistry, biology, medicine also. So I think the answer is it will be very much discipline based. Okay. For my discipline, I think a large part of practice can happen online, because you press some button in the computer somehow. But for other discipline, I really hope medicine will be nearly 0% of the practice. I hope, and so on also for other disciplines like chemistry. So I think it very much depends on the discipline. But if you teach machine learning, maybe you can agree with me that good part of the practice can be done online. So in our discipline, maybe people tend to be more introvert, and they will want to use this introvert solution more. But if you want to teach top thinker and not just software developer, go back to the offline education as much as possible. So I don't think there is a unique answer. It really depends on the objective and on the discipline.
Thank you. Any more questions? Yeah.
Thank you. Alexandra Andrilia from the Faculty of Economics from Skopje. Yes, I wanted to add that I found your presentation very interesting, and actually a lot of perspectives and things to talk about and to think about when you're coming from the higher education. But one thing, since I'm teaching OB, organizational here, so I'm more torn towards soft side of business. I think that education, especially at the university level, is more of an experience. And you mentioned Ivy League is where we can learn by the same book, but the word is to have that networking behind you and in your professional career. So I think that we should be maybe careful saying that we are strongly committed to online education. Maybe I don't know if you agree. Maybe PhD students having their relationship with their mentor, it makes us more efficient by have consultations with people who do not have the opportunity maybe to travel and so on. But we have to be very careful, I think, at the undergraduate studies, especially because I think that this new generation, especially also talking about generational differences, this new generation is very hard coping to communication skills towards in a working environment. And I think that we even make it harder if we turn a lot of things to only online. So maybe, I don't know, I would like to hear your comment. That would be my question. Undergraduate studies, not so much online, but maybe master or PhD.
Yeah, I completely agree. PhD I didn't even touch because I think about online PhD education, unless maybe you're a person with some disabilities. But I'll tell you my opinion very, very clearly and also boldly. I think the next generation of leaders, people who find high position in jobs will be those that make use of mostly offline education. But if we need to flood the market with software developers, with basic programming skills, probably online education can compensate the lack of this professional on the market. So it's basically a fork between one kind of professionality and another kind of professionality. I know this is very bold, very arrogant claim, and I take the responsibility for it, but only in 20 years, maybe 20 years I'm retired, but in 20 years, okay.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions? No, we've received one online comment, and yeah, thank you for great plenary sessions, especially Professor Mazzaro's presentation is world-class, exquisite. So
saved by online participants. So
yes,
once more.
hybrid, hybrid. Thank you. Thank you very much.
I return the object because usually I forget them in my pockets. And yeah.
No problem. Thank you very much. Thank you very much all for taking part in the opening ceremony. I hope the conference brings many fruitful discussions and many more new insights. I also wish you a pleasant stay and a good time in Belgrade. Now we will have some refreshments, cocktail and networking on the ground floor of this building. Please feel free to join us. Thank you.